And we're recording.
All right.
Illumisoft podcast number 7?
Yeah. On
7.
August the 28th.
Already.
Yes.
I'm Dan Prince.
I am Matt Heelan.
And I am really looking forward to podcast today.
Yeah.
We have recently started to put our podcast on YouTube.
Yeah. Okay.
In addition to Buzzsprout.
Yeah, I noticed we got some views. I don't know, obviously not a lot, but there were some views there. That's kind of scary, but
yeah, I don't know how that works. I know that I didn't share it with a whole lot of people, but I went out to that first episode on YouTube and it's got 20 something views. Yeah. And I know I have brought it up a couple times just to check and see that it was correct. So maybe some of those are mine.
Yeah, I do. I do know that I've been talking to a couple of different people that have expressed interest, and it has occurred to me that I was going to share it with them and just say, because it is kind of like a commercial in a way, right? And just kind of say, hey, if you want to get to know us, watch the first 20 minutes of the first episode, and so I'm sure as we get better and better at this, we're going to figure out ways to share bits and pieces of it that are more targeted and stuff like that.
Right. We can actually start doing that now if you want to.
Okay.
The idea, the guy that I hired to do the video editing, the idea was that I was going to have him edit 4 podcasts a week, 2 of my other podcasts and 2 of this one. And we're not quite there yet in terms of having the time to do 2 podcasts a week, but also, we're busy with lead generation and hiring project managers and UI UX people and all the things. I would like to make it a habit to do 2 a week. But I think it's more important to do 2 a week when we are inviting people in to talk with us. That was the original goal.
Yeah.
So back to the original goal. The original goal was that we would get 10 episodes in before we started inviting people in, partially so that we figure out how to do it and don't make any big mistakes, with our guests. But also because I don't want people to go out to our YouTube account or to our Buzzsprout or wherever else we're going to host these and only seen 1 episode.
Right.
Because I did a little bit of research and I found there's a lot of people out there with 1 episode. Just it, right? They lost interest or whatever it is. They stuck their toe in the water and pulled it back out and left the indention.
Yeah. Well, I guess speaking of our podcast, so I know I have a list here of things that I was going to talk about.
I made a list too this week.
Right. So I try to make my list throughout the week as things occur, and I see news that pertains to what we do or just interesting things, and then also I'm taking problems or challenges that we face as a business and want to bring them here to talk about them, just in terms of how me and you talk about those things, and again, so that if the listeners are other small business owners and they could benefit from hearing how we've tried to resolve some of those things, then maybe they can they don't have to slog through the process of it.
If they have faced the same challenge and overcome it, we'd love to hear about that. So my list too, it contains those types of things. So if we have a business challenge during the week, I jot it down and I want to talk about it. So what do you have on your list?
Well, we talked a little bit about this morning before we came on, is why relationships fail, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a big, because that's a big topic, but it pertains to multiple parts of our business this week that I've kind of thought about.
So when you say relationships, what popped into my mind was, girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, that type of relationship. But if I understand you well, and I think I'm getting there, relationships are the same regardless of whether they're personal or business.
Right. A lot of the elements are all the same, right? So if we want to jump in, just talk about it.
Now let's go down the list. I want to see how many of mine overlap with yours. Really,
the other ones are just, the other ones are more about, the process that we're going through to find a lead generation company, the process that we're going through to find, people to hire and what that's been like. And also just, again, more current news stuff that I've just kind of flagged here. So those are kind of the 2 or 3 that I've written down.
So I have hiring challenges, right? I'd like to just put those out there. I'm sure other people have challenges too. And this is what I'm doing this week to try and overcome them. I have lead gen, which I would like to also just talk about what we've experienced and some of the things we've learned, even though I don't know, I don't think I'm at the end of that journey yet. And I don't know that what I've learned is what I'm going to go forward with, right? I think I still have a lot more to learn.
Right.
Then I want to talk about some of the other challenges we've had this week, but in a more general way, and that's customer service. How to provide really good customer service in the face of difficult customers.
Sure.
And then something else that I was hoping to touch base on is, because of the lead gen efforts, I am getting some responses back that say our case study is good, but not detailed enough.
Right.
And so I think it would be great, maybe not great, but good.
Right.
Somewhere between good and great for us to actually discuss case studies on the show.
Right.
And go through, hey, we did this and what were the challenges? What were the benefits? And then figure out how we can add more detail in there for those clients that would rather digest it in that way instead of getting us on a phone call or however else.
I had some thoughts about that too this week. So, yeah.
So I've got a number of case studies that I think would be legitimate to talk about, including Neurogen, MyCare, Dexy, our concussion sensor, and VR training that we're doing for UMKC.
Right.
So that's what I've got. But relationships is something that is near and dear to my heart.
Sure.
I really think that this is one of the biggest challenges in the world among people is relating to each other well. So let's start there. What did you...
One of the things that sparked it in my mind, because there's a couple of different, I guess, ways it connects, but the first one actually is as a parent, is that, my daughter grew up in front of a phone and in front of social media. And so this podcast that I was listening to this morning just made me start thinking about the negative impact of technology and how it affects your relationship as a parent with your kid, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of different studies related to screen time and, how much time people spend on Facebook or Snapchat or TikTok or, whatever the platform is, and what that's doing to a young person's brain or self-confidence or body image or, whatever the negative impact can be. And I think we've talked about this a little bit before on a different topic maybe, but what I realized was, and the context of this was the news article about TikTok being sold to Microsoft and Trump getting kind of in the middle of it all. And they interviewed the CEO of TikTok and they were talking to him and they said, the interviewer was asking the question, what guide rails are you going to put in place to try and prevent some of these negative consequences on your platform? Since you're the newest kind of cool platform to be on, what lessons are you learning from, say, mistakes made by Facebook or some of these other platforms that have come before you? And they rattled off, 2 or 3 different things they were doing to try and provide these guardrails. But the CEO then kind of turned the question around and said, but as a parent, what are you going to do? what are you going to do as a parent
That's
to,
awesome.
right, to ensure that your kids looking, you're watching the content with them, you're monitoring their screen time, you're talking about what they're seeing online and how they feel about it, right? You're talking to them about, content that they may have seen that may have been upsetting to them, right? It's a conversation you're having, right? It's not your kid camped on his phone. You don't know what he's looking at or she's looking at, and you're not engaged with your kid in that relationship. You're
Right.
just, it's the old adage of plopping your kid in front of the TV. And
What is the CEO's name? Do you know?
I don't recall. It was,
I love that
Yeah.
he said that, though.
Yeah.
And it seems like we struggle with that kind of misunderstanding a lot. And when I say misunderstanding, it's like the CEO clearly recognized that the implied statement when they ask him, "What are you going to do to protect our children?" was that he has the responsibility
Right.
to protect them. When in reality, we all have the responsibility of protecting everyone to some degree, right? We can't just go downstairs and fire off a bomb or light a fire that's toxic or any of those things because we know that there's other people. Well, I think we have this systemic approach to asking questions that make implications that then become fact or
Right.
a foundation. Kind of like the school system who is charged with providing education. And it's more, I think, the thought process in parents' mind is like they provide education. They provide education in terms of books, smarts, but also in terms of how do you act in public and how do you interact with people. And providing education is not forcing education. I think it's kind of like communication in speech. I say the words, it's up to you
Right.
to absorb those words and make sense of them, right? So it's up to the school to provide the information, but maybe not their job to ensure that the child is getting it. Whose job is that? That's what you're saying too,
Right.
or what the CEO said.
Yeah, and I think I think that if we were to draw the connection to that kind of a discussion back to the way that we interact with our clients, is we have a responsibility to communicate to our clients. You've asked us to go build this thing, and it's our responsibility not to just continually say yes we can, yes we can. We have a responsibility to say there are limitations to the technology that we have to maybe go build the thing that you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what the correlation being, just like TikTok has the responsibility to say, as a parent, you have a responsibility as well. And so it's kind of, it's about the communication between a client and us, and making sure that it's open and honest so that we can go back to a client and say, here are some limitations, right? And it's the client's responsibility to be able to communicate to us what they see our responsibilities are, right?
Right.
In building that, right? And oftentimes enough, I think maybe that communication breakdown, as we've seen and even talked about today, is really what is preventing us from being successful for our clients in some cases.
Not all our clients.
No.
I mean,
No, I'm just saying, if we go back and dissect where we haven't been successful, it typically comes around communication.
absolutely. Every single time it does. In this case, well, let's dive into it a little bit. Let's air some of the details about this, because that's something on my list, is customer satisfaction when faced with customers that are challenging.
Right.
So my expectation, my ability to provide the service that a person seeks is dependent on us building a relationship where I can talk to them and ask questions, and they will give me honest and direct answers. And when that breaks down, when that inability happens, it's impossible It's impossible. It's not just that it's harder, right? It is impossible to get to the end of the journey with them without knowing it's going to be a failure in advance. We can continue walking, but if we're not hand in hand, then we're going to get there and hate each other.
Right. I always say that the additional challenge that we face, especially in the healthcare industry, is this idea of, the difference between working with a client who, let's say, owns his or her own business, has an idea for a technology project, has set aside a set amount of money to go build that thing. Mm-hmm. That experience is different working with those people than it is when you add the additional layer of working for not-for-profit hospitals where they're going to get grant money to fund the technology project that they're going to give us, right? In my estimation, because of that causes another layer of engagement and communication to understand the entire process that they're going through and the limitations that you have that are surrounding that, right?
Right.
Because now it's
a little bit complicated. Maybe we should explain it further, but I understand what you're talking about.
Right. So the idea, most of the clients in the not-for-profit hospital world that we work with, they have a physician who has an idea that may involve technology. In order for that physician to get that thing built, he or she has to go out and apply for a grant through NIH or some other organization. They write a bunch of documents to try and convince people to give them the money. They win the grant money is awarded to them, and then they, inside of the hospital, has to decide, can I use an internal team to go build this thing? And if they don't have the capabilities to do that thing, then how do I go about the process of seeking out experts to go build the thing? And then how do I decide, do you get all the money to go build it, or do I need to set aside a certain amount of money to do whatever I need to do internally, right? So it's a little bit more complicated of a process of where the money flows through, right?
Right. And I think you missed one step, and that is that they don't know how much money to go ask for unless they engage, people like me,
right?
People like us, in triplicate, and then they go and ask for the money, and then they have to do it again. And so,
right. So the one example that I'm thinking of was this human genome database project.
Joseph Alamo.
Yeah. So he says, what do you think, Dan, it's going to take to go build this? And we say, here's a dollar figure. And he goes out and says, okay, well, I need to go get a grant then for that amount of money because Dan told me that that's the amount we need to go get.
But actually, Dan told him this is a really rough guess, right. A rough estimate, and there could be up to 200% off.
Right. And so that discussion is different with a client who, again, is being financed by their own money, right? Because now we can say, we estimated it. We've dug further into it now that we've initially estimated, and here's what based on the additional features or requirements you have around it, here's another number. That process to adjust for them is easier, right? Because now when you put that situation into a not-for-profit, I went out and got the grant money. It's not enough. Mm-hmm. Now what do I got to do? Do I go ask for more grant money?
Yes.
Right. But I mean, the process for them to go do that is much more involved, is all I'm getting at, I guess.
Yep. No, I agree with you.
Yeah. And so, but what the mistake that can be made is that they go out and get the exact amount of money that I thought Dan told me to go get.
Yep.
And then they get it and they go, well, I thought we were going to be able to do it for all this. Right. There's the communication piece, right? That is important for us to be able to convey to people because of that extra layer that they've got to go through. And I think we do a good job of it. But it just adds another challenge to it. So.
It does. I got to be honest with you. In the past, 10, 15 years ago, it was much easier to say, look, this is technology, right? Anything can happen. Your project is not something that we've done before. If it was, we would just it would be done already. Every project is different, and therefore we just can't tell you. That response is becoming less and less acceptable. So,
right,
and it's still difficult. We still have the same challenges. We kind of know before we start a project what can be done and the details and challenges around that. But we never know all of the details. We never know what's going to cause us a lot of problems until we run into it, right? With one of the things is syncing. I don't know if this is, we should go into this as a case study, but we were asked to provide the ability. This is on an application, a mobile application that has a database that is on the phone. So the data is stored on the phone. It's not stored in a regular app environment where it would be
more ideal.
Yeah, in a cloud.
Right.
A web-facing database with an API in front of it and things like that. So we have the data on the phone, and then the request came, well, we need to sync this with 2 phones. Well, that's easy enough to do as long as one of the phones is only pulling and the other one is the only one that can send and receive. It can actually be done to sync it both ways, but it takes a lot more work. I mean, exponentially more work. And I don't even know what that exponent is, but it's not insignificant.
Right.
But if we don't ask those questions and we don't know that up front, and then we get to the point where it's being requested, well, no, both phones have to be able to update. Now it becomes a huge intractable problem, an intractable cost, right? That the client may or may not say, well, that's what I asked for from the beginning. Well, because in a way they did, but in a big way they didn't either, because the devil is in the details.
Right.
They didn't say that one thing that would have made it impossible versus all of the things they did say that it was still possible. So how do you get beyond that kind of lack of communication or inability to communicate at 100%?
Right. Well, and I always, for some reason, I always think the ability to solve those problems is based on the knowledge that's in the room. Right. So in other words, I don't know if I'm right about this, you would know better, but if the person I'm sitting across the table, what is their level of technology understanding? Right? Are they a developer? Are they an architect? Are they a layperson? Is it easy? Could we prevent more miscommunication from happening based on who's across the table? I don't know the answer.
Well, in this particular case, and we're not naming these people, but we're kind of challenged because they are themselves an internal agency.
Right.
So we're an agency. We go out and we find clients and we work with them to produce technology solutions. One of our clients is an agency within a larger company.
Right.
And so they go out and they find clients within that company, and then they broker the relationship.
Right.
And there's a lot of challenges with that, just to put it nicely. This is for me to deal with a middleman in between the person that wants the work it's costly. In fact, if I had to guess how much it cost us in terms of percentage for this particular project, I would say it's probably embarrassingly about 60 to 80%. 60 to 80% more than it should have cost.
Right.
If we were talking to the people that had the answers instead of the people that were asking the people that had the answers.
But my question is that even if they were the middleman but were more technical, would that change anything?
It absolutely would, right? Because I'm the middleman all the time. But if I understand the problem so well that I can relate it to the people that need it to be related to them in every way, right? In every way, and still be consistent with what the client wants, then it reduces the risk that we're going to take it back to them and it's not going to be what they want.
So would the problem then be solved if the middle layer that we're talking about, if that team of people had the skill set or person on their team that was a technical person, right? So in other words, they go out and go to the internal people that want the thing built, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they bring it back to that intermediate team before it reaches us. But that intermediate team has a technical person to bridge it between, bridge the gap to us, right?
We would need something like that, but I'm not sure if that would fix this particular problem.
I guess all I was getting at.
Anytime that you can reduce the number of people, I mean, it's like the grapevine game, right? Every step of the way, every communication point is a failure point. And it unfortunately, we don't communicate clearly. None of us do ever. Right. We communicate enough to get the point across, and we never are positive that we got the point across.
I think to your point, though, we talked about this earlier, is quantifying that cost to them. It's saying, and for us to track and report that to them to say, okay, we understand how you guys are built internally. That's obviously not something we can change, right? But there is a cost associated with that. And you guys need to understand that. And it's our responsibility to convey that to you, right? And it's our responsibility to say that if we were to remove some of these obstacles, you could absolutely save money. And if you don't want to save money, then we'll just keep doing it this way, right?
Right. But we also, so we have yet to explain this client or what the challenges are with them. And I'm a little bit hesitant because I know they'll listen to this, but let's do it anyway. Because the situation is that they are an intermediate in they're the client, but yet they are not the end client, right? So we don't know exactly what the requirements are. Somebody else does. They bring us the requirements, but we know for a fact that what they're bringing us is not 100% fleshed out.
Right.
So we don't have the details that we need. And so whenever we take those requirements and say, yep, we can go do it, we are putting ourselves open for disappointment in that they will go back to the real product owner and come back to us and say, we never meant that. We never expected that, whatever it is.
Right.
Regardless of whether our communication with them in the past led me to believe that that's exactly 100% what they wanted. There's nothing that holds them to that. And so that's been a challenge because to the best of our ability of explaining exactly what we think they told us they wanted, they have yet to clearly specify for us whether we were right or wrong and how wrong we were and what was wrong and how to fix it. Right. So we're always taking off and there's always timelines that are aggressive. So we have to get to work. We have to get to work without all the information, and we have to be 100% responsible for anything that doesn't go according to the original product owner's desires.
Right.
So whether or not the requirements were gathered incorrectly and passed to us incorrectly is insignificant. What matters is, does the product that we've produced meet the other person's goals? And it's really hard to do because they never do. Right. And it's that gap, that barrier, that middleman, that has to be the problem.
It is. Right.
It has to be.
Right.
In my mind, it has to be. And I'm not saying that like it's a fact. I'm just saying I'm pretty damn sure.
Right. Right. And I think an outsider, a third party observing, if they were to be watching our relationship with them, they would probably reach the same conclusion, right? That if a third party said, okay, I got Illumisoft here and I got this organization with their complexity over here, and there seems to be some issues related to how they work together, it's my job to come up with a recommendation. My recommendation is remove the middleman, right? So any objective party would look at that and say that, and then it's not just, in other words, us saying we've got the best idea. It would be somebody that objectively would look at that and they would say, yeah, that would probably be the best solution.
Well, I definitely think it would. But then there's the other side of it. The counter argument that we've heard from this client is that when they meet with these internal clients, they meet on so many things that it could be an 8-hour meeting, and an hour of it would be the things that we need from it. Which I think that's worth it. Why don't you invite me in for an hour and I'll leave afterwards and you can continue your discussion, as long as that discussion does not change the results of what I left with.
Right.
And I have a feeling that would be impossible to enforce or to even do, right? If we're talking about something and then, or there's another person here and then one of us leaves the room, there's always a little bit more discussion and, brain work is where I was going, I guess.
The scenario that I would like to see is, let's say that they came to us with this thing that they wanted to build, and we could run parallel tracks. We could run a track that said, in this process, we're gonna do it this way. We're gonna do it the way we've been doing it all along. We're gonna have the middleman phase. We're just gonna follow that process, and then we're gonna run the same project through, but we're gonna change the way we do it. And the way we're gonna do it is we're gonna invite you to all the meetings. You can stay for the entire thing. So therefore, now you have context as to the person's original thoughts and ideas around it and what they're really trying to achieve. So it may be insignificant in some ways for you to go build it, but it's great to know the thinking of the person, right?
Sure.
Right. So now,
not to mention just being in the room to ask the questions that need to be asked when they should be asked.
And so if we ran parallel tracks and we got to the end, the theory would be is that one thing would be built better than the other thing.
One thing would definitely be less expensive, or there would be some attributes about that project that would stand out.
Exactly. Yeah. And unfortunately, that's not a real thing that can happen. But
no, but you know what is real? What could be real is if we took our time to document every step of the process at the project management level, right? We go and talk to them. They told us this, boom, documented as a step on the timeline. And then if we've documented an entire project, then we can go back and remove all the things that we think are extraneous or don't need to be there. We could have avoided all of these things. We can both show the reduction in time that would have occurred if our thesis is correct, right? That we can reduce that time by not having them be in the middleman. Not only can we show that the time would be less, but then we can extrapolate that into how much it would have cost.
And speaking of, like on your list today, was case studies. We would be able to have a case study that says to be able to present to them to say, not necessarily what's wrong, but
what's not right, and what could be better,
and how you can ultimately be seen as a much more beneficial resource internally to those people that are your customers, right? If I say to you, if we improve the process by the way that you work with us, you can look like heroes internally to your team, because now we know that when Dan and his team give us an estimate based on a better process, we know it's going to be solid, right?
I would hope so.
Right.
Like I said, it's technology, so it's hard to be solid, but we could definitely be quite viscous. Right? We're getting better at it. Right. We're getting better and better. In fact, we estimated this last module for these guys, and I think we had 2 user stories that were over by a very small amount, and the rest were right on track. And I think that in any technology project is amazing.
Right.
But we're just getting in the groove, and we understand this project and what the expectations are well enough that we can estimate that clearly. What we're not estimating or showing them is all of the other work that we do around the things that they do seemingly to try and protect themselves from us. The extravagant need for minutia financial accounting, right? It always adds up. It always adds up to the same thing. Either we've spent more because the work was harder than we thought it was, or we've spent less because it wasn't. But it's all the same. I mean,
right.
Let's talk just about challenging clients, right?
Right.
I'd like to move away from pointing the finger at a particular client or a particular instance, and just in general, if you have a client that is holding his cards close to his chest and doesn't know what he thinks he knows, for instance, in the case where you're not a product owner, but you are in charge of managing the technical side of this project, and the developer that you have working, in this case us, doesn't have access to that person. How could we make that much more efficient? How could we make that kind of a relationship more efficient without being in front of them? If, let's just say that that's a constraint. No, there's no way, right? There's no way we can get on a call with them. There's no way we can get on a Zoom meeting. There's no way we can talk to them. How could we do that project more efficiently, knowing that there's going to be a lot of going back and forth between our client and the real product owner?
Well, I mean, my simple answer is that we have to have skilled individuals that, from our side, that are good at the elicitation, that the business analysts do, and that the project managers are helping coordinate. I mean, a part of it has to be, our skill set has to be of such a high level that we can function within their constraint, right?
And we can.
Right. I know we do.
We do, but it's expensive for them, and we also get criticized because of the cost.
Right.
Well, how can we help them? Right. We've been recently asked, and again, we're back to this particular client, which I'm not trying to be, but this situation seems like it could be helped if in the beginning of the project we got some period of time with that client, right? Mm-hmm. Rather than 100% never get to talk to them, if we could get them on a call just one time for 4 hours, right? And go through all of their expectations so that either I or somebody else that is good at eliciting the details could get the majority of it out of it. And that way, not all of it would have to go through a middleman. We could get, it seems like, the 20-80 rule, we could get 80% of it really easy.
Right.
So that might be one approach.
Yeah. Yeah. It would be interesting. I mean, for any, it would be interesting to understand how other companies are able to overcome that. Right. To see if there is something that we're not thinking of in terms of technique or methods that they use to overcome that. So,
that might be a good thing to post on LinkedIn.
Right.
I'm sure other companies are challenged with it, and just ask for some advice. How would you guys handle this?
Right.
I think that's.
I mean, we even interviewed this week. We interviewed a company, a nearshore company, and we kind of were describing our projects to them and what were some of the challenges that were faced. And I think he even remarked to us, the question he, I guess, asked us was, well, where are you guys at with the product owner, right? What's your relationship with them? Are you talking directly to them, or are you not? So you could already tell he was seeing that as, that's going to be a challenge if this is the kind of setup that you guys have.
Yeah, and he clearly understood that it was the communication path that mattered most.
Right. And so you got to believe that he's he had built this company from 10 people to 600.
Uno Square.
Yeah.
From 3 to 10 people, I think he said, to 600.
Right. So, I mean, obviously he's seen the challenges, right? He knows what they are. And so, it's not us imagining that this is only a us challenge.
Right.
Right.
And plus, we've only had 25, 30 clients. that's as 1 in 25, right? So it's relatively common. This is not like 1 in a million. So somebody's got some answers out there.
Let me go back just to add a more broad question in your mind. So we've been talking about, their client, but let's just say we're talking about anybody that we develop any relationship with, right? So a lead generation company, a social media company, an outsource company, I think over time and experience, we're beginning to create in our minds expectations around what we want from a partner, right? So what are the things that you're like, I don't care who we're partnered with, they got to have this at a minimum for me to begin a conversation with?
Well, they have to be trustworthy.
Right.
Which to me, that means that they're willing to look at themselves and their actions critically and say, I'm wrong. Right? Because anybody can say they're right. We're all prone to that. So trustworthy means the willingness to change your position and admit, when you're wrong. They have to be trusting, right? Which doesn't mean they trust everybody, but it means they have the ability to trust people, the ability to take the risk that's involved when you say, yep, I'm going to trust that person. Without that mutual trust, there's no avenue to walk hand in hand towards a goal, right? There's no avenue. Maybe avenue isn't the right word.
I get what you mean.
Yeah, there's not an opportunity to work together if you go about it like that. That kind of relationship would work good in, say, discount tire, right? I don't need you to trust me. I'll still do the work. Right. I don't need your help in doing the work. I don't need your advice, or I don't need to know your opinion other than, is this the tire you want? And are these the services that you want? I'll do the services like I do them every time. The problem might come in is you say, yes, I want my tires rotated, but this is how I want them done, right? Whatever that is. Right now, the guy's got to go, I got to
turn them around in a circle.
Did I take the right tire off first, or right? It just becomes confusing.
So trustworthy is one, and I guess when I think of that element of a relationship, I guess as we talked about it in a different way this week, trust is something that is built over time, right? Mm-hmm. So not to correlate this to dating, but it is similar. I didn't, Jody, my wife, and I've been together for over 10 years. The first date that I went on with Jody, I didn't say, golly, I really trust you. Right? It took me behaving consistently over a period of time of a certain way, consistently over time, to build trust. Right? And that's what this takes with any partners that we find. We've got to see consistent results over a period of time to build trust. And they need that from us, right? We've got to perform consistently over time to earn their trust, right? And so, but at the very beginning of me dating Jody, if I had been inconsistent or did something out of character, or something that may have caused her to say, I don't know if I know this guy really well, right? Then all of a sudden your trust just drops, right? And you're like, And I see the same thing happening in relationships, new relationships that we build with companies, right? I'm thinking of one who will go nameless, where from the outset of this relationship that we had, and this is related to like email marketing, is we were promised one thing and not delivered what was expected. That, especially in a new relationship, is crucial to saying,
absolutely,
this is the dating game, right? Is that you told me you were a good guy. Now you've done something to show me you're not such a good guy.
You told me you were 200 pounds and you showed up at 215. Yeah. It's not that big of a deal, but it is everything.
Right.
I don't know if I can trust you now.
Right. There's, especially in the beginning, it's very small things that lead us to not trust people. And so and the secret that everybody's looking for is how do I speed my ability to trust someone?
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hard to do.
It is. It's impossible.
Right.
You can learn to trust somebody much quicker if they are over the top trustworthy.
Right.
And they have to be. You have to not only believe they're trustworthy, but without the challenges, right? Without testing them or having, the conflict, right, that might allow you to trust them.
Right. And I think and not to answer my own question here, but the other part for me that's important and in a partnership with anybody is there has to be that level of mutual respect. And this may be a stereotype again that maybe isn't true anymore. But people that come to software development companies, they have to respect what we know, right? And
what do you mean they have to?
They have to respect that the skill that we have is typically something that they don't have, and that it's a high level skill, right? So if I approach a software development company and all I wanted to do was, in my mind, was I just need you to go build this database, do this thing, and that's all I need.
It's easy. Anybody could do it.
I don't need you guys. I don't need to. In your analogy, that people that come to us and look at us like we're Discount Tire, right? They come into that kind of relationship not with a foundation of respect for what we do.
Sure. No.
And those are people.
We're a machine.
Right.
I feed it and it spits it out and I pay for it.
Right. And those are people that, if we can sense that from the very beginning, those are people that we're not going to be successful for because they don't have a built-in level of respect for us. Right.
Well, I don't know, Matt. I think you're correct that you need something. I wouldn't term it respect so much. I think what I really want from them in terms of respect isn't initial respect. It's the respect after I've delivered.
Gotcha.
It's the gap between that. If they initially came to me and they go, you know what, I'm going to go with you guys, but you'd better not screw me. Right?
Right.
And then at the end they go, wow, that there's the gap between what they thought and what we gave them. That's everything to me. Right? I want to delight our clients to that level. I think it's possible. But we can't delight somebody that's not going to share the details and the nuance.
But I guess maybe what we oftentimes talk about is we sometimes will get clients that come to us who are entering it from a bad experience.
Right.
And they've got this mental mind framework in their head now before they even begin talking to us. That's what I mean by respect, right? Is they've come from a bad experience with another developer to us.
Not respect necessarily for us as individuals, but just in general for the industry.
Exactly.
Kind of like people with chiropractors sometimes, right? Some people that have had good experiences swear by it.
Right.
Other people swear against it.
Right.
I have no idea what's right. I hear Joe Rogan, and he had somebody on his show that was knowledgeable on it, and both of them said that chiropractic from the beginning has been a crock. Of course, they're talking about from a medical perspective, like that's not going to heal you, it's not going to keep you. It does help, right? If you've got a crick, that
the popping,
that chiropractor can definitely help you over time to work that out. I had a nice tight spot in my shoulder from stress for a good 2 years, right? Because I'm busy trying to build this business with everything I got.
Right.
But I had to go to a chiropractor, and over a period of 9 months, going a couple times a month, we slowly got it to where it was gone. And I felt it dissipating over time. Of course, not just the chiropractor, but go to the chiropractor. I make sure I stretch every day and do all that stuff.
Right.
But I forgot where I was going there. Well, yeah, because you've got people that come to you that don't respect you, your function, not necessarily you.
That's
so. What do we need them? I mean, a good client. That was the question, right? They definitely have the ability to be trusted and the ability to trust. They also, I think, they have to understand in order for this relationship to be good and for them to be a good client for us, they have to understand that this is not banking or accounting or something that it is by the numbers, right? This is not construction where you have a blueprint and you follow the blueprint, and you can tell if you're wrong because you can measure against the blueprint. There is no blueprint for any of this stuff. And the time that it would take to build a blueprint would be about the time that it would take to build the project. So which should you do? Should you build a blueprint and then build the project from the blueprint? We could do that. It's twice as expensive.
Right.
Not twice, but it's definitely more expensive.
I know we've had conversations about this, but the industry analogy is more aligned with the experimentation of science or the creativity of art, right? When you're trying to draw the comparisons of what it's like to be a software development company and go build something for someone, if somebody said, well, what's it more like? If it's not like banking and it's not like architecture,
right,
what's it more like then? And that's what I'm saying is in science, we have to build something, experiment with it, fail, then go rebuild it. And in art, we have to interpret something from someone into something, right?
Sure.
So
a commissioned piece of art.
Right.
And in art, there is no way to say whether it's good or bad. It's subjective. And in science, there is no way to say whether you reached a goal or not. You did some things. They either helped or they didn't, or they either showed a direct help to scientific approach or to the science that's going on, or they didn't show a direct help. Doesn't mean they weren't helpful, right? So,
yeah, and I go back to thinking about projects where they had all those challenges, right, and where at the end of the day, the client said, "I am delighted. I'm happy with the work that you did." All right. And I think about our work with Dr. Clements. Just recently, even in the last week, I think you were in the meeting, and we and this kind of connects to some of the case studies stuff. So we and of course, it's more complicated than this, but this is a big part that he was talking about so we built this app that is connected to a device called a Malia device built by Biocorp out of France. And that device fits on top of an insulin pen. The person injects themselves with the insulin pen, not like this at all, but then it's Bluetooth connected to their phone. It records the injection information, like the type of insulin, the amount, units, and then we take that data and we put it into a bigger data set on a back end of it. But we finished that app recently, and he his feedback and his stakeholders that he's responsible to all gave us positive feedback that it does what we expected it to do, and it was a very big milestone for us to overcome. I think was his words. So
it certainly was. So let's talk about that project a little bit, just because it in comparison to what we've been talking about, that project did not go well, right? We started that project, we got it done in the time that we said we would get it done, and we realized that the communication between our solution and the device was shoddy. But it wasn't because of our solution. It was the device. And so we ordered new devices, right? We got an updated firmware on those devices, and nothing we had done worked.
Right. Yeah, I was just going to say there were two challenges in that related to the device. The firmware was the one that was the most crucial, which again, I suppose highlights another communication issue, right? Because Biocorp was over here building their thing, right?
Yeah.
And they knew they had a group of people out here using it, testing it, playing with it, getting ready to implement it with a real world scenario. And they just started saying, well, we updated this firmware. Oh, but we didn't tell anybody.
Well, he had told us, and I asked him specifically, it was going to change what we were doing. And,
Right.
and what was his name? He said, no. He said, no, absolutely. We're not changing any of that.
And so that caused us to reset our
80% of the work was in that communication because we weren't making this, a UI UX masterpiece.
And then on top of that, later on, this was more recently, the determination after doing some more thorough testing was that the device itself was not retaining its battery life.
The Molu device?
Yeah. And so as we're testing in and people are doing multiple injections every day and they set the device down, then the battery basically would erode very quickly on not all the devices, but just some of the devices. But that caused enough of a concern that they had to go back and look at how they manufactured it, and then they gave us new devices, which seemed to have resolved the issue. And
they didn't change the API or the firmware.
No,
thank goodness.
No, and so. And then I think that also highlights the same thing we were talking about earlier in terms of the ecosystem of who's involved in a project, right? That wasn't just, Illumisoft and Mark Clements. That was us, BioCorp, Mark Clements, and even another
Children's Mercy and Jabe and Helmsley.
Right. And so that's just a big group of people, right? That there's a lot of change requests that can happen,
sure,
for a lot of different reasons. But
they were happy with us, right? Yeah. Even though we had to build that software twice, and even though we built it twice, there was one little piece that took 3-4 months because we had to go back and forth with the manufacturer. And by the end, they were like, when, guys, when are we going to get it? And we're doing all we can.
Right.
They're pressuring us a little bit, trying not to be obnoxious to us because they know we're doing the best we can. But they were patient and they understood our challenges, and we got through it, and now they're happy. Right. So comparing them to a client that wouldn't be good for us would be somebody that wouldn't take into consideration anything outside of what they think their world exists of. Right. Even, recently we had a talk with one of our clients about a particular feature for their app. And in their explanation of what the feature they were looking for was supposed to accomplish, I suggested, hey, let's add this other feature in here, this infinite scrolling, rather than, because we want to make sure that we have their attention for 10 minutes from the time they open the app. And there's a concrete reason for that. I said, well, if that is the entire goal, why don't we make this particular part scrolling infinitely, which means that when you get to the bottom of the list, it automatically puts the top of the list on the bottom and so on. So you just scroll, or infinite scroll to the left or right. Either way, it's not that much work, but it made sense to me that if you just want to make sure they're on the device for that long, then you would let them scroll through it a couple times. If they're just scrolling and that scrolling effect is doing anything to pacify them, then let it, right? So we had that conversation and we documented it. And then they came back and said, I don't remember approving that. Well, that's hard. That's a hard relationship to manage because it's like, well, you did. You told us, we went off and worked on it. What could we have done different other than making the relationship more of a challenge by saying, we're not going to do anything until you give us a signed document saying we can do it. Right. And then not only a signed document, I mean, you might have to take it a step further and say it needs to be notarized, or we need to have it reviewed by an attorney, or, I mean, all of this stuff is just ridiculous amount of minutia to cover up for the fact that we don't have those two things we talked about.
Right. And I was just going to say, and that going down that road ensures as a small business that we're going to lose money.
or that we're going to be way more expensive,
Right.
When we complete a project than is delightable. Right?
One of the things that big business and small business, not to get off on a different tangent, but that big business complains about a lot is the implementation of regulations, right? Because they know what that translates to them in terms of cost to be able to produce. And so for a small business, when we add layers and layers of process, not for a purpose, but for
Covering our ass.
I don't trust you, right?
Right.
The more layers that we add onto that, that's the equivalent of big business regulation to us, right?
Yep.
And so, all those years of working, at RSI and working in small business, owners of businesses spot that stuff really quickly, right? They know when they start to work with a new client and a new relationship, the question becomes, how easy is it going to be for me to work with you? Because if you're going to make it hard, I might lose money.
It's like that old adage. You used to be able to go into a mechanic, a garage, and it would say, my price is $45 an hour if I do it.
Right.
It's $85 an hour if you want to watch me do it, and it's $185 if you want to help.
Right.
I don't know how much it would cost if you want to actually guide me and direct me. That's
$220. Right.
But the thing about, I tell people all the time, in life, in any goal, you're either taking steps towards it or you are falling behind. You're never staying still, right? So you're either spiraling up or spiraling down. And when you start a relationship with a lack of trust, what you're doing is you're forcing the other party in the relationship to act similarly. They have to then cover their butts because they want to prove that they are trustworthy, and they have to have some documentation or something. They have to do work in order to protect themselves against the attack. The lack of trust is an attack. Then they have to respond to it, which causes a greater lack of trust. It is spiraling down.
Yeah.
It has to, by virtue of the fact that it's not spiraling up.
Yeah, I guess the counter example of that, to go back to the relationship with Dr. Clements, has been we built trust through transparency, right? He was very transparent with us from the very beginning of that project in terms of, look, here's what we're trying to get built. And again, in our world, he is the product owner.
Yep.
Right.
He's the one that designed it and thought of it. He is the architect.
Right. And so we were talking directly to the person who was going to help us build it. He was the direct person responsible for the money. And I got to believe that is the reason why at the end he was delighted.
I'd like to think that that had something to do with it, because there were far fewer failure points in the communication path on the grapevine, so
right.
It's a good thing. What do you say we take a quick break? And we're back. And I think we kind of exhausted that subject.
Right.
I mean, probably not exhausted it, but we certainly talked about everything that we directly wanted to cover.
Right.
So I don't know what else is on your list, but one thing that I would kind of like to do is talk about hiring. And we've been particularly challenged with it. With a number of our clients, we have seen a great deal of turnover on our side with project management specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of the reason with that, or for that, is that we don't know how to hire people. I mean, I say that, but I hired you. You're a great fit, Matt.
Right.
I've hired other people too that worked really well, but then either didn't stay or, and I don't know what the perfect hire would be. I don't know if there's really a perfect hire template that one could follow.
Right.
I would guess that it would be somebody that would come in and exceed expectations, or at least have put forth the effort to enable themselves to exceed expectations, or to go beyond what they know is expected. Reliable, well-spoken, friendly, client-focused,
Right.
respectful. What
Right.
else?
Well,
Organized,
well, and
ambitious.
I guess one of the things that I go back to is my experience in hiring, and the fact that if we felt, in my experience, if we felt that we were, and I'm referring back to my time at RSI, because when I was at RSI, we went through this huge growth period. So I would literally spend 8 to 5 every day just in interviews all day long.
For how long did you do that?
For months.
Wow.
Yeah. Because
so you were the HR.
Well,
for
they
that
wanted
company?
the department person to interview the people they were hiring for.
Did you have an HR department too?
We did.
Okay, so you were just doing part of it, and it was taking all day.
Yeah,
for months. Wow.
and to be fair, and Jody, my wife, was there at the time when I was doing this. I can be a talker, and so imagine me in an interview, and I'm asking, and you've seen me interview, right? So I ask a lot of questions, right?
Mhm.
And so sometimes I can just
Your questions seem geared towards
discover
creating conversation,
right?
things that you can converse about.
And so there were two different challenges in that case. One was we got to staff up fast.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't match with your interview style, Matt, because we can't have you spending an hour with everybody to get them in here. We need you to interview fast and get a bunch of people in here soon. And then there was a different time period where we weren't hiring. We didn't need to hire as fast, so I could be a little bit more leisurely, right? But the thing that I learned about that was it shouldn't matter who is interviewing the people as much as we need to make sure we all have the same process that we follow to interview somebody. In other words, it's not like we only had a set script of questions we could ask or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the end goal was, did we make a good hire? And was there a way for us to know with whatever degree of certainty that you can, that we feel pretty confident that we're making a good decision? And one of the ways that we're now sort of trying to move in that direction is this idea of testing people, right?
Yeah.
For many, many years at RSI, you would interview somebody, and the HR person would come in and she'd say, "Did you like them?" And I'd say, "Yeah, they seemed nice enough." And they're like,
litmus test, right?
Right. Just, all right, well, you need to hire them then. And then you'd hire them, and they'd come in, they'd do an all right job, right? But they didn't exceed expectations. They didn't, a lot of stuff. But we weren't good at it in terms of how to know how to get better at it. We just kept going on gut and
kept going.
A lot of it was, quite frankly, was if somebody got referred in, right? If somebody got referred in, they were hired, right? A buddy of yours said this guy was great, and you interviewed him, and he looked great.
Often that actually works out really well.
Right.
But why? I think that's the key.
Because the same quality of people hang around with the same quality of people.
So the quality of a person is more important than their skill sets, or tell me a time when this happened or that happened.
Character matters.
Yeah.
Right.
And how do you define character? I mean, I know how you define character, but how would you define a character, a person's character that would be a good associate to work for, regardless of the skill set that you need?
Yeah. I mean, look, we've done a decent job, I suppose, of defining what our values are as an organization. We've built a list of things that we think we know we don't want. We don't want somebody we can't trust, right? Going back to our earlier conversation about partners. We know we want people, it's a counter, but somebody who's honest, somebody who's, and some of these are very observable, objective things that you can know, right? As long as you ask good questions in the interview. And then some of these things are going to be subjective, right? Where you're only going to find out after the fact, right? But as much as the objective stuff that we can get nailed down, and values like character are hard to nail down, but as much as the matching of the values of a person to the organization, to us, is what we should be after. I think that the addition of us giving tests like you're doing with some of the candidates that we have, is a great way to say, not just kind of how you work, right? Do you work slow? Do you work fast? Do you organize yourself in this way or that way? But I think you're also going to get questions from those people that are going to be insights into their character, their personalities, right? It's just going to be a much more in-depth way to do 2 interviews and have to feel like you got to make a yes or a no on somebody, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm hesitant now to hire anybody because I have consistently seen my inability, which I have minimized in the past, right? Sure, nobody's able to hire the right person every time. Well, it seems like in reality, if you hire the right person and they turn out to be great, it was luck. So how can I get the goal of hiring the right person and knowing they're the right person seems to me then to be far-fetched, right? It's a fantasy. You can't really do it. So if I set my new goal, where should I set it, right? If my goal in hiring somebody isn't to hire the right person, but to get somebody that has the fewest amount of disqualifications, right, is really probably more aligned with reality.
Well, we've all looked at job descriptions in the past, and there's 2 sets of qualifications. There's the basic qualifications, show up to work, work hard, very just basic set of expectations, right? And then there's the sort of additional ways you might be able to distinguish yourself, right, in some way in your work somehow. If we say, one of the things that I going back to the RSI experience of hiring fast was my pushback to the HR people that were pushing me to hire faster was, do we just want bodies? Because if we just want bodies, I can do that all day long.
Sure. Craigslist.
Right.
Come on in.
Right. I mean, we can put the guy with the spinning sign outside RSI if you want and just say, come in, we're hiring, right? But I'll tell you what the consequence of that is. The consequence of that is it's going to cost the organization a lot of money.
Sure.
We're going to get people that don't mesh well with our culture. And that's a cost. And so
that's not the only cost. The cost that you go through to hire people is there too.
Sure, the time.
If you need 100 people and you hire 100 people at that workout, boom, 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 right? Let's say that you give each of them a full day as opposed to an hour, right? So you hire 100 people, they're 8 hours a piece is what you invested in them. That's 800 hours. Or you want to do it quick. So you give each person an hour, right? So you hire 100 of them, that's 100 hours. But 50 of them don't work out. Let's say probably more realistic 60 or 70 don't work out. So you go back and you spend another hour on those 70. And then you spend another hour on the next 60 and another hour on the next 50. Not to mention the consternation involved in managing all that and getting rid of those people and starting their insurance and stopping their insurance. And pretty soon the cost of not doing it right is far more than the cost of sitting down and doing it right.
Right. Well, and
if there is a right. I mean,
well, and I would argue that, look, hiring costs everybody money, small businesses, large, but it impacts the bottom line more dramatically in a small company if you do it wrong. Just because we got less resources, we got less room for error, right?
Right.
And so
everything impacts a smaller company if you do it wrong.
Right. And so, in the case of RSI, the mistake that was made was we had a group of about 60 employees that made up the core group of our main department in client services revenue generation of the company. Mm-hmm. And it was a high performing group of 60 people. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to overnight replicate those 60 people and that high performing environment to 120, right? And I was kind of protective of that because I was protective of this is a high performing group of people that are exceeding every client's expectations every day. and you want me to expand that and make that bigger. I can do that, but I got to do it the right way, because now we're injecting a bunch of strangers into a bunch of high performing group of people, right?
Yeah, even one stranger can change the dynamic.
Absolutely. And so, and I know that doesn't necessarily relate back to us, but as a small company, we have to have really high performing people that work here, because the crucial nature of we need people that are really dynamic and that can consistently exceed what we need them to do, because our clients expect a lot, we expect a lot, right? And so those are, I wouldn't say those are hard people to find, but we have struggled to find those people, right?
We have.
And I go back to, Dan, one of the things that when I first started, for me was very educational, which was before I started here, I had never hired a developer, right? And so I had created with you and others this sort of like, how do you test for hiring the right developer, right? And what we came up with was a series of tests and questions that we would ask. And I was like, is this going to work? But then I sat in on interviews with you and others, and you would ask questions that I couldn't have ever asked.
Like what?
Just about how they developed a particular project, or how they used a particular thing in the project,
like MongoDB,
right, or whatever. And on paper, I'm thinking, man, these people are impressive. And so this he's going to be good. And then at the end of the interview, after you had really kind of questioned them, it turned out that the guy didn't know half as much as what I thought he did, right?
Yeah.
And so what we've got to do is be able to do the same thing for the other positions, like the project managers and the business analyst people, the same. And that's what I think the test does that you're developing.
Well,
is to feel more confident that we're making the best decision.
Yes. But that isn't the end goal. The end goal for me is to know much better what I actually hired. Because in the end, I feel like it doesn't matter the amount of testing or the number of interviews or how long I've sat and talked with somebody. In the end, I don't know if they can do the work until they do it, right? I don't know if they're going to respond to this client's out of the blue request in a way that I would want them to, or if they're going to, blow it up and say, that's, unreasonable for you to ask me, which never, ever would I think that you deliver customer service by getting irritated with the client. But until they face that hurdle, I don't know how they're going to overcome it.
Well, and I guess going back to trust, I mean, in an interview, you can ask a candidate to say, describe for me when you had a situation like this and the client was unreasonable, and how did you respond?
Those questions are really good to see if the person is listening, if they've practiced, if they can make up something on the fly that sounds good, or if they can even answer a complex question and get to the end and say, yep, that's the answer to your question. A lot of people, when you say, tell me about a time when this happened and you overcame it, and they'll start wandering around a lot of times. So they're racking their brain to find something in there, and then they start talking, and pretty soon a lot of words come out, and then they're done. And did they answer the question? A lot of times you might be able to interpret some of the words they said as an answer, but I'm a hard ass. I'm not going to take that. It's like, hold on, right? In the spirit of communicating, I need to make sure that I actually understood what you said, and I did not, right? So let's start again. I'm going to ask the same question again, and you tell me what you just told me, only answer the question, right? So I don't have to implicit. I used to think that was a much better way of going, but in the end, what you're really doing is just finding out if they practice well enough or if they interview well, right? And I've hired people that I thought were awesome, and found out what they were really awesome at was interviewing.
Right. How many people do you think that you've hired successfully? Like, do you think that if you were in total not just here, but I mean
in my whole career,
you
starting from
right,
1996.
that I think 30% of the people that I've interviewed.
I hired Moose.
Yeah.
Moose is the research director of the Research Institute at Children's Mercy Hospital now. So he was an awesome hire, right? And he was a challenge for me too, because I had to hire somebody, and Cerner at the time hired only people with pedigrees, right? You had to have a degree, and Moose did not when I hired him. But his resume clearly showed that he could do the work. His resume was ahead of its time. Everybody's handing out these resumes on thick card paper because that's what made them look good. He didn't have the thick card paper. He had bright white paper, but on his paper, it looked like a modern website that today's websites look like, with the menu on the left and the menu on the top, and the information organized in such a way that it brought the attention to the stuff that really mattered. I looked at the resume and I said, and I was hiring for a visual, right, as a front end person. I wanted them to create the actual front end of the solution. So I looked at his website and I said, this is brilliant, right? Just the fact that you didn't regurgitate, Microsoft Word template resume says that you're creative and you think outside the box. And he was a great hire. And I look back, it's been 20 something years. I did good. I got lucky. Another really good hire, I've done a couple good hires at DST. But I think what it came down to in those cases were that these people had the integrity and the motivation to come in and do their best. And beyond that, their best actually met the expectations. So again, luck, but less luck in trying to determine a person's character. So those hires were good character hires. Moose was a good skill hire, and he turned out to have really good character too. But that's not what I was. Right. I got lucky. I got lucky on the character part. These two I hired well, and I got lucky on the skill part. And I consider you a good hire, but honestly, on that front, I think you kind of hired us. I didn't see any reason not to hire you, and you were fairly persistent.
Right.
I'm really thankful for that, Matt.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and which brings us kind of full circle, which is I think this way, but I mean, I think of things in terms of process, right? Everything's a process in some way. And when I see us in a process not getting the results that we're trying to get, I just go back and think of things. What is it that in the process we're not doing correctly to get the right result? And a lot of companies make a lot of the same mistakes where they're in a hurry to hire a bunch of people. And so they kind of get a little shaky on the process, right? We'll just kind of take whoever. Or that's the opposite, right? Where, they take too long to hire, and
the person took a different job.
Right. Or just, quite frankly, it's too late now where the project's already started and we got to go. So I'm just trying to figure out, and I think, I do think that if you look at the hiring process just in total, we're inserting in their middle there now a test. Right. And so maybe that's going to enhance our ability to feel more.
I'm excited about it. I'm excited to see what the results are. And we're already actually starting to see them. Yeah. So let's describe that test a little bit. We keep all of our project information, documents, whiteboard pictures, everything in one location. We try to break those up into file directory structures. over time, for longer projects, those directory structures tend to become a little bit cluttered. And I have had it on my plate for a while to go through and straighten up this one directory structure that needs it, just so we can continue working towards them and have everything organized. Plus, if we want to bring on somebody that will run that project, it's really nice to be able to point them towards that in a way, and have them utilize it or be able to utilize it in a way that gets them up to speed quicker.
Right.
But I liken what we actually have there to my mom used to make us clean out our drawers by taking them out of the chest of drawers, out of the dresser, and dumping them upside down on the bed, and then folding them up and put them back in the drawers. So if they're folded up and in the drawers, that's the directory structure that we want.
Right.
If they're laying on the bed, that's the directory structure we have.
Right.
So I think this test, what I needed that cleaned up.
Right.
And I think it's an adequate test to find out whether somebody's up for the challenge. There's 1,693 files in there. Some of them are duplicate because I know that you have saved files in there and it goes in projects. And I went in there and saved files and I said, it goes in data or whatever it is. So we end up with not just two, but usually multiple duplicates. But we also have duplicates that aren't duplicate. They're versions of the same document. And it's a mess. So the test that we devised for these new project managers, I'm thinking about what I asked them to be as people was organized, ambitious, friendly. What else? There was the three. There was five of them.
There was probably a customer service aspect to it, maybe.
I don't know what it was at this moment, but it was all of the character traits and none of the skills, right? I intentionally left the skill set out of it, and I also left the title that we were hiring for out of it because part of the problems that we've run into is if I ask for a project manager, I get people with PMPs coming in here, and it's like, this is not going to satisfy them. They want a real project. Well, this is not.
And then we switched to like product owners.
Yeah. So product owners or business analyst or, the person that we're hiring really has to be a mixture of a lot of different things. BA, QA, customer relations, salesman, tech lead, maybe not tech lead, but definitely able to talk tech to tech people and those kinds of things. So I think the test that we organized was geared more towards measuring character traits than it was towards measuring skills and how well, the quality of the skills, or measuring, choosing experiences and then trying to map those experiences to this one. So 1,693 files, 3.5 gigabytes of pile of clothes on the bed. And I've already started seeing it. So we gave them the file. Can you download this zip file? Right? Do you know what a zip file is? Do you know how to open it, extract it, all those things? And I didn't tell them how to do it. I said, here's a zip file. Part of the challenge is to see what you do and how you do it. Right. So it's not supposed to be something that you can go, I know this, I can solve it. It's supposed to be something that's challenging, and you have to use your creativity and your gumption to both do the work, but also know when to ask for help. And I told them, it's not going to be easy. You will need some help along the way. Right?
Well, and I think it also is interesting. Some of the feedback that we've already gotten is sort of like how they analyze, right? Mm-hmm. It's like how are they looking at it and how are they organizing it? But in the questions that they've asked, it's interesting because they're it's obvious the way they are going through and analyzing what the documents are and what they're about. And is this thing connected to this thing? Because I think it is, but I'm not sure. Right. And so.
Right. And some of a question I got yesterday was fit into that analogy really well. The person is looking at this big pile of clothes on the bed, and she asked, how many drawers does this fit into? Right. And I thought that was perfect. That's an excellent question that I could have never teased out of somebody, that you can look at this thing and your logical next step is to figure out, well, before I even start sorting it, I have to know what I'm sorting it into.
Right.
Which I thought that was excellent.
Right.
That was a thumbs up.
Yeah.
+1, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Nobody +1s anymore. That was Google
+1.
Yeah.
We get rid of that.
Google Plus.
Yeah. Well, and Dan, it's no different than going back to the developer interviews that we would do. I mean, in some cases, right, we would ask developers to go out and, show us your work, or I don't know that we ever asked anybody to go build something for us, but
No, but we should have.
yeah.
The problem was that I think at that time we were limited in what we thought we could ask them to do.
Right.
Right. So one of the things that makes this hiring effort different is that I actually already hired these 2 people.
Right.
The 2 people that are taking the test are doing so on my dime.
Right.
I hired them because I want them to work for 80 hours so I can see what they can get accomplished.
Right.
The contract was for 80 hours and only 80 hours.
Right.
Some of the things that I think we'll be able to get from that is, will they put in more than 80 hours? Will they admit to putting in more than 80 hours? I'm going to guarantee you that if I'm doing, if anybody, I believe anybody is taking on 80 hours worth of work as a qualifying
Right.
type of activity, they're going to get to the 80 hours and they're going to put more work in because they want the job. I told them specifically, I don't want you to do that. In fact, I don't think you can get done, and I'm hoping you can. This test isn't supposed to be something that can be completed. It's meant to be something that represents how you go about solving a problem.
Right.
So I'm hoping that they don't come back and go, yep, got it done.
Right.
Because I'll have to really question whether or not I can believe that.
Well,
Right.
I did. I also thought it was interesting that because of the sort of paying them to take the test question, that it did immediately sort of make them acknowledge their value, right? Because you asked them, like, so what do I pay you an hour? And you got, I think, between 30 and 60 or something.
Well, one person gave me a rate.
Yeah.
She didn't give me a range. This is it.
Yeah. Right.
And that was cool. The other one gave me a range, so even just that interaction told me something about these people.
Right.
And the range told me, if you give somebody a range, you give an employer a range of what you should make, the employer is going to pick the lower end.
Right.
I mean, they would be stupid not to.
Right.
Well, I don't know, stupid, because I didn't.
Right.
Because I'm just not that kind of guy. This person gave me a range.
Right. But you kind of picked in the middle.
I picked in the lower middle.
Yeah.
Because I deserved to, since she gave me a range. Right. But I didn't just pick we'll pay you the lower end of that, because I didn't want to give anybody the impression that I'm about the money.
Right.
And arguing over that $3 or whatever it was an hour said more about me than it did about them.
Right.
So I didn't argue. But the knowledge that you get when you say, well, how much do you want?
Right.
Boom. That's quite beneficial to know.
Sure.
Right. If one of them had said, I probably can do less than $110 an hour, well, game over.
Right.
I mean,
right.
Thanks, but I can't do that.
Right.
So we're not even in the ballpark.
Yeah, and I think that we're in a position, because we're a small company, that paying somebody to do a case study or an analysis is fine. Obviously, we're only going to, in the future, if that's part of the process of hiring somebody in that role, we're going to tailor that to be just for the candidates that we already feel strongly about.
Yeah, definitely. This is costing me 80 hours times, so maybe $2,500
Mm-hmm.
to get done.
Right.
But it's not all lost. I mean, right. Making back to your point, right, is we can hire somebody right now, but you can hire 5 people and do it wrong every single time, and it's going to cost you way more than slowing down and doing it right one time. So I think this is more costly, but it will probably give us much better information.
Sure.
And even if it doesn't highlight that this person is perfect for the job, it should give us a much better visibility into the challenges that we're going to face with them.
Sure.
And so if we know the challenges, we can head them off before they are damaging.
Well, and even going into this with the people that are doing the test, we talked about, I guess, what you would call suspicions we have, right? I suspect they might work this way. I suspect they might work fast or slow, or right. And I think, to your point, I think if anything, maybe it'll validate that we were wrong or that we were right about it, them and how we think they would work. I mean, I think of the one person and I just think, yeah, we're a sort of, group of very productive people and producing a lot of information and things for our client and for the company is important. Having a person that is sort of slow and meticulous,
methodical,
right, might not fit well, right, with that. But
tortoise and the hare,
right. So, but I do think that, because our vision of how the company continues to grow, it is definitely tied to our ability to hire better, right?
Absolutely.
I
think that's true with any company.
Right.
I think it's even more important in this day and age. There's a lot of people out of work out there,
right?
And it's sad that they're out of work, but it's a buyer's market.
Sure.
We need to make sure that we know how to buy, right?
Right.
What is it? The world is our oyster. Is that a phrase?
It used to be. Yeah.
Used to be. Well, when I was a young man. But there is a lot of availability
Sure.
of highly qualified resources
Absolutely.
out there.
Right.
But if we have yet to figure out how to distinguish them, then they're just a bunch of resources. They're not,
so
highly qualified, any of them.
Before I ever got here, did you guys ever, I thought you told me you talked to that company that they do the culture fit index thing.
Yeah.
So I did that. We hired the guy at RSI to do that, and they take the quiz, and based on your criteria, they match people up and blah blah blah. I think I even took that when I joined Cerner. I don't know. I never understood if that was valuable or not. I never understood if it was accurate. Or
I think it's valuable. I don't think what they're doing is accurate. Right. I had a client one time, Patrick something, I can't remember, but he wanted us to build him an application that would match dog personality to people personality. So pet and pet owners. And he was apparently a well-known, I think, neuroscientist, psychologist, maybe, something that he had written something. What is that test that you take in business? Martin or
are you talking about
something Briggs?
Yeah.
You don't remember it?
Not Briggs and Stratton. That's a lawnmower.
Not Briggs and Stratton. No. Myers-Briggs.
Myers-Briggs, right.
Yeah. So he had written something that was similar to that. So you sit down and you answer all these questions, and he can do some math and tell you what your character is, what your personality is, what you're likely to be good at and not good at. And apparently, according to him, and he had some evidence to support it. So I'm not saying, but all I had to go on was his word. And it was way, way better than the Myers-Briggs in producing the results that actually told you about these people. And he was trying to sell that to different people, right? And not having a whole lot of luck. So he's trying to go a new route, and he came to us, and he was working with Cesar Millan.
Oh yeah.
And apparently just trying to fill out the deal, and said, we need you guys to build us an app that takes in these characteristics and produces a result for pet owners. And we'll need to build another one for the dog side. So if people are trying to rehouse their dogs, is that a word?
Yeah.
Trying to give them away.
Oh.
They could take a personality test of what their dog is like so that they can match it to the right owner. Because, some dogs are just grouchy and they'll snap at you, and that's not good for a family with kids, but it
Sure.
might be really good for an older gentleman or something like that who,
Right.
that dog doesn't have to worry about anybody coming around except the old man, and
Right.
it'd just be loving and protective. It
Sure.
makes sense. So that never actually happened, but that test that he had, my feeling is that even if it was a better test than the Myers-Briggs, I think it gives you a false sense of confidence that you then know something about those people that you cannot tell from a few questions.
Right. Yeah, I think the one that I took, they had some follow-up questions, right? So they give you the results, and they're like, you are this and you are that. But then they sat down with me and they went through it, and that, like, literally, we're just here to validate this is you, right? And so they were much more, they didn't just, some companies, I think they give the test to the people, they read it, they say, okay, they're that person, then they just make a hiring decision off of it, right? But we actually spent some time actually talking about it, which was kind of weird because it felt like it was like a semi-therapy session in a way. It was like, so
why do you feel
right?
like
So are you really this way about things? And yeah,
got the midnight DJ voice on,
right? I mean, but look, the reality of it is we have to find a hiring process that gets us more consistent results, and that fits within a small company, right? We can't create this 5-step process of interviewing somebody because we think that'll get us a better result, because that's just not realistic. It's not realistic for my time or your time, right?
It's kind of like creating a 5-step process to educate somebody. Everybody is different,
right?
Or raise a child. 5-step process to raise a kid. I mean, everybody's different. So
right. And so
I think you got to get in the ballpark.
Yeah, and I do think the test is headed in the right direction for that. So
yeah, I feel good about it. I haven't heard back from them today, but the questions that I've heard indicate that they, the test is telling me what I need to know about these people. Right. And so I still don't think that hiring is going to be, I think we're going to make mistakes. Right. I don't think there's any way not to.
Yeah, I don't think I would be surprised if anybody could tell you that they foolproofed hiring, right? But to your point, I think there's plenty of people out there that could probably say we're pretty good at it. We're the 80-20 rule, right? That you say, we feel 80% of the time we make the right hire, right?
The other side of that coin is, and I've heard this from a number of professors, authors, et cetera, is there's no way to make the right hire. There is nobody that will fit into any position exactly the way that you envision them fitting in there. Because if you envision anybody in any position, it's because you have experience with somebody else in a position similar to that. But somebody else and similar to that does not mean that. Right. So you're always taking a gamble. You're always taking a risk. And the better approach might be to really get to know somebody. And if you like them and you trust them and they have the character that and the morals, your morals and, your goals in life align with theirs, then they might be a good person. Then you have to find out what skills they have and what character attributes, and you have to fit them into a position or make a position that fits them like a glove in order to optimize their contribution to the organization. In smaller companies, that's easier to do.
Right.
like we do, right? You're managing a project manager and running sales, right? I'm helping to architect systems and doing sales and accounting, right? We wear many hats. I guess that's been said.
Right. Didn't you tell me that this whole optimize people for what they're good at position? There's been a lot of stuff that's been written about that, right? I thought maybe you were thinking of a particular book that.
It is a book that I have read a while back. I don't even remember the name. It might have been the Google book about OKRs.
Oh, okay.
Also might have been the book that I read about meritocracy. That company in New York, the financial company. I've read a bunch of books. I don't remember the name of them.
Right.
But, I was thinking about this morning, about me and my learning process. I read a lot and I absorb the books and I absorb the information. But you know what I don't do? I don't give a shit what the author's name was or what the name of the book was, which is it's a problem, because then when I go to talk, I usually, I read something sometime that said something like this.
Right.
And people do that to me, and it's like, well, if you can't tell me who it was or when they said it, it means nothing to me. So it still means something to me to know.
So here's a book that I picked up that I liked. I mean, I liked the concept of it. It's a book called Designing Your Life, written by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans, and they teach a course at Stanford called Designing Your Life. And what's the concept of the book is that design companies in the past, their process for designing something, like they interview the CEO of, do you remember a company called IDEO?
No.
And so they're basically like, think of companies that create or design something. So maybe they design an Apple iPhone. They design, their process for how they go about designing something is a process that people could probably learn from about how they go about designing their life. Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
concept. Anyway.
Yeah. So Dave and Bill, they wrote this book and it caught on pretty quickly. It's like their most popular course at Stanford. And so it's been out for like several years now, but I never have sat down to read it. But I thought that in my sort of fascination with process, right, it's always interesting to see how different people go about achieving the same goal, right?
Right.
So that was a book that I read, and then I just read recently that they wrote another book called Designing Your Work Life, which
sure makes sense.
All right.
And Designing Your Play Life is next. Designing Your Parenthood Life.
Right. So
it's unfortunate. I mean, I'm sure the book is great, but every time I see a sequel after sequel, it starts to detract from the original value.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the guy one of the guys that's made. I mean, there's a ton of guys who make livings doing just that, right? But
they do. A lot of authors do, and Seth Godin is no different.
Right.
You know how many books he's written? Hundreds.
Oh,
hundreds of books, because he just would put out a book every week, right? Having other people write them, and he's proofreading them. I listened to a podcast, might have been a YouTube video that he was on one time, might have been Impact Theory, but he said, that's how I learned to write. That's how I learned to create content. So I just did it every single day.
Sure.
Right? And I've been meaning to, since I heard that, to go out and see just what are all his books, because I would love to read some of his books that sucked. Right, just to give me an idea of who he really is.
Right.
You read all the good stuff that have made it to the top of the charts, the rest of it falls off.
So Patrick Lencioni, he wrote The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
I think I've read that.
Yeah. And then he wrote the one that I have actually on my bookshelf is The Advantage.
Read that too.
Right.
Really good book.
Yeah. He's the kind of guy who just every year he puts out a book, right? And the reason why his business books are a little bit more easier to consume is he tells them with a kind of a real world scenario behind them. So the 5 dysfunctions of a team, he told the story of this company and this team and how this leader was trying to, figure out who on the team was going to be helpful and, all this stuff. But he's a guy who uses the same concept to just produce more and more of the same books.
Some of those aren't bad.
I'll be honest, Dan. I mean, for a long, long time, I read business book after business book. And I find myself more and more now just more fascinated by reading biographies. Just real people who have, and not even just business related, just biographies about people who have had challenges that they've had to face or just their lives.
That's what I think this podcast is. I think that I'm hoping that that's the appeal that we have to our listeners, is that it's not necessarily about business. It's certainly not about Matt or about Dan or about illumisoft, but it's about 2 people having a real conversation about real things in a real way.
Right.
And I think people are keen to that these days. They crave it in a sense, because there's so much stuff out there that is, it's hard to tell whether it's true or not true or sensationalized, or, if you and I were sitting here and we were taking a break every 10 minutes to put an ad up, right, and then complaining about those people that are beholden to, ad companies or right. And my stepmother's husband sent me a podcast of a guy that he really likes, because he's a Trump supporter. I'm not, but I'm willing to engage with him in his concept and his thought processes. And I said, who do you listen to? Who don't you listen to? Right. Intentionally not listen to somebody. And I shared with him some of the podcasts and people that I listen to.
So he sent you.
Yeah. He listened to him. And so he sent me his guy.
That's funny.
And I'm not even going to mention who he is, but this guy was promoting a right-wing school that taught things that the Republicans believe in, but nothing else. And he said that we do this because there's a reason for it. But he also said those damn Democrats, those liberals, they won't teach anything that's outside of their domain.
Right.
Which it's just hypocritical.
Right.
Right. And so he also said that there's a reason, I can't remember who he was talking about. It might have been Sam Harris or Jordan Peterson. There's a reason that these guys put out so many books. It's because they need the money. They're not telling you anything that you need to hear. They're telling you what's going to make them money. Hold on for this commercial break.
Right.
I was just taken aback at the hypocrisy and the fact that my stepmother's husband fails to see it. He's a smart guy.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Yeah. It's funny because, and maybe it's getting older a little bit, but there's a pattern to the way that people in business talk and think, right? And at least I think it goes like this is, and because business concepts and business ideas are just like popularized popular media types of things. In other words, it's popular for all of the kids between the ages of 10 and 15 to be on TikTok, right? It's also popular for everybody in business to be reading this book and applying these principles, right? So I think back to when Crucial Conversations came out, right?
Yeah, did you read it?
I was at Cerner. It was a highly suggested thing that you go read, right? Which meant and because they bought 100,000 copies of it for the entire organization, you were going to read it, right? But then it's interesting to see the cult-like application of that in organizations, right? They take a book and a concept. It becomes the way that we talk and speak and interact with all of our employees for a period of time until the next thing comes out. And the next thing comes, right? And then we talk and we speak like that because that's the book that everybody's reading now. And so
the pattern is that we continually adopt a new, better approach.
Exactly. And it begs the question of any kind of real individualized thoughts about how we're going to run our business, right? It's if you're always borrowing concepts from a book and applying it to your company, it's never really your company. It's really just you taking principles and ideas, applying it to see if it works, and if it doesn't, you move on to the next thing, right? I think that the business people that learn from books, they are cherry picking concepts from bits and pieces that they know work. They're putting it together and they're saying, this feels right for me.
Right.
Right.
But I do that too. Sometimes you use a book, right? And I'm a firm believer of Crucial Conversations. I think it's valuable even to this day.
Right.
There's nothing in there that is time specific, right? It's really about people, how they feel and how your words affect them. If you're upset with somebody and you come in and you show them that you're upset, well, they're going to get upset. They're going to feel attacked and they're going to get defensive. That's mathematics. It's not mathematics, but it might as well be 2 + 2 = 4 every single time, unless that person is highly mindful and decides, oh, you're upset. How can I help you? Right. But that's Crucial Conversations, right? It's not just how you approach somebody to confront them, but it's how you accept somebody when they confront you.
Right. It's the adoption of the concepts by companies that in some applications feels a little inauthentic.
Yeah. Buying 100,000 books, read it, shove it down our throat, get the same thing I got from it is probably a little far-fetched.
Right. Did you ever read any of the books? It became pretty popular a few years ago called Holacracy.
Holacracy.
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
So
is it HOLE or
HOLO?
Holacracy.
Yeah. Holacracy. Sorry.
Holacracy. Okay. What is it about?
So Tony Hsieh, who ran Zappos up until this week, who retired, he became fascinated with this concept. And the idea was this like decentralized version of a company, right? Where everybody's, and I'm going to probably not do it justice by explaining it, but, it was this idea of the decentralized management where people are more in control of how the company operates every day. And everybody has a role, has multiple roles within a company. And depending on what role we need you into, maybe you're in a leadership role in this capacity, but then you're not in another capacity. Anyway, so it became a popular concept very quickly. And I read the guy who and I can't remember his name now. I read the guy who, wrote the book. And I read it and I thought, this could work. This could work in some small, medium-sized companies. But there was a lot of things that were wrong with it that wouldn't work in a lot of places. But it became a bestseller. A lot more books were published about the whole concept and how it would work. There was all this back and forth debate. There was a point in which Shea had implemented inside of Zappos, and there was this rebellion about it.
Tony Hsieh came up with this?
He didn't come up with it. He kind of became friends with the guy who created the concept of it. But anyway, so that's all I'm getting at is that there are a lot of companies, I think, and maybe there's a lot of small businesses who see the answer in helping their company run better or making them more profitable or being, making themselves in a unique position of some sort by seeking the answer to that issue in a book.
Sure. Yeah, I'm guilty myself.
Right.
There's been quite a few times where I've read something like the one-page marketing plan. You read that before? Well, so it's a good book. But the answer to all, it is not, right? But it is really good, and it makes you think, oh, if I do this, I'll have it made, right? Everything will align perfectly, and nothing is like that. And so I'm with you, right? I don't think you can buy a book, give it to somebody, and think that they will interpret it and adopt it the same as you. So as an owner or leadership in a company, you have to read the book yourself and adopt it. and share that knowledge with the team. Once you've shared the knowledge and getting them to believe like you do, or to see things like you do and question why you believe that way, then they're ready to read the book. Right. So it is more of a top-down thing, but it requires interpersonal, interaction with them, at least with, your direct reports, and they can have the same thing with their direct reports and so on.
I have this famous, I guess it's only famous to the people that were in the room. So this is when I was at RSI, and we were taking the same concept that you were just talking about, as a small company, somebody somewhere had read a book. We were frustrated with, I don't know what, engagement maybe of the employees or something. And I was in a room with, I think, about 30 people, and Jody, my wife, who I worked with at the time, and she was in the room, and she reminds me rather frequently of this situation. And I got super frustrated because I was like, you guys, I was engaged. I thought it was a great idea. I was like, I don't understand why, you're not on board with this and that. So I got super frustrated, and I said, look, you're either on the bus or you're not.
Wow. What an ultimatum.
And Jody was like, she's like, oh, you just lost so many people in the room. And it was, regretful, obviously, the minute I said it, but
lesson learned.
But it was just, it was a lesson in, at the time, a lesson in reading a book and application of a concept, right?
Yeah.
And my application was terrible. But in retrospect, what I learned from that was that in a small organization, I have to engaging employees in a way is not a destination. It's something you're always going to be doing, right? And I thought I could force them down the road to the destination of being engaged. And
transport them down there,
and it wasn't going to work.
It's herding cattle, man.
Yeah,
they're going to walk at their speed.
Right. And so so that was kind of one of the things that I pulled away from that. So,
well, Matt, we got 2 hours in here. This has been a very insightful conversation.
And I honestly think, Dan, that the pattern that we're establishing, maybe a little bit more now that we're getting more experience, is just to kind of say, not that we want the podcast to be like, well, what did we do this week? But in a way, I mean, I think that's the value. One of the values is, again, if we think of our audience being other small business owners or other small business people, it's nice to be able to listen to a podcast to say, I wonder how they dealt with this challenge this week, or whether it was a sales challenge or a customer service challenge or whatever. And I don't think we're smart enough to know that we're always going to have good answers or the best answers. But in the spirit of small business, we're at least trying to find the answer, right?
That's, I think, all we can do. If you're a prospective client listening to us and you hear our challenges and how we overcome them, and you think we're idiots, you should definitely not engage us, right? But if you think that we fit with your personality and your approach to life and to business, then this is a perfect fit for us.
Right.
I think we are falling into that pattern. I don't know how we could do anything else. Since we're having these every week, soon to have them every 2 weeks, there's two options that I see. One is that we talk about the things for that week, because we'll very soon run out of everything else that we have to talk about that isn't relevant or timely. Or we bring in people and talk to them,
right,
and find out what they have to offer, and just give them both a platform to talk on, but also, we get knowledge from other people. I see Joe Rogan doing that. He's talking to some really intelligent people, and he has people every day on his show. And I'm envious of the questions that he gets to ask them and the answers that he gets personal answers that he gets from them. It's amazing.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be interesting if we tried to do like a podcast that was us conducting an interview? That would be weird.
Like to hire somebody?
Right.
Yeah. That I'd probably be better at it if I was doing it because I'm
right.
Well, I mean, there's been a couple interviews where I'm just like,
right.
What else do you want to tell me?
Right. Yeah. I think we need to start thinking of people that we think we could bring in and we could learn something from, or our audience can learn something from. Right. I think. I know Dr. Clemens has been somebody that we've talked about bringing on. I know Moose has been somebody that we've talked about, for different reasons. So yeah, I think we're not short on ideas around people that we think we could talk to, but
yeah, I don't think this setup is good for more than 2 people, but we can definitely do something. Like I said, we'll get our 10 podcasts, and at that time I will reconfigure this because I really, really think there's huge value for me personally in being able to have an interview style podcast and just learn, everything that somebody has to teach me.
Right.
And the same thing with you. I'd love for you to interview people, or both of us to sit in and just have a great business-based, technology-based conversation about stuff that will help people, our listeners.
Sure.
So that's it then. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. Please comment, leave us suggestions on how we can be better. Tell us your challenges with your clients too. We'd love to hear them, and maybe that'll be something for us to talk about on future podcasts. All right.
Cool.
Goodbye.